Joining us now is Michael Kroger, former Victorian Liberal Party president and Sky News contributor. Michael, thank you for joining us. I mean, just looking at CNN's coverage, we only played a handful of grabs there, but we could have kept going. There is plenty of content. And I suppose it really explains the huge drop in ratings over the past year.
They're like a boy band from the 1980s. I mean, it was good at the time. It was all fresh and clean and well-cut hair and, makeup and all that stuff. It was good whilst it lasted, but it's no longer relevant. I mean, CNN, 20 years out of date. They're still talking about the issues that were left behind a generation ago. I mean, well pre-Trump. So its ratings will continue to decline. No one much is watching. That Scott Jennings, every time he appears, he's become an international star, that bloke.
He has.
He appears at that freak show every week or so. And he looks normal. And then you've got these rabid, leftists who really just make fools of themselves. So, no, well done to him. Taylor Lorenz, for goodness sake, a young, woke, female left-wing activist praising this guy charged with murder. I mean, seriously, some of these people have become just freak shows of the left. And they're doing their long-term career untold damage because whilst they might be, funny or different for a short time, as time goes on, people think we can't have these extremists on our show. So she'll disappear from the global media in due course because these views are the views of nutters.
Yeah. Look, I want to talk to you about Daniel Andrews. Of course, former Labor premiers Daniel Andrews and Bob Carr have attended Beijing's Victory Day military parade. President Xi Jinping delivered a speech and was joined by North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un and Russian President Vladimir Putin. I mean, Michael, I have to get your thoughts on this. We've heard from other Labor figures like former Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk. She's slamming this. Can I get your reaction?
Well, they shouldn't have gone. I mean, but I think the answer is that both Bob Carr and Daniel Andrews have got commercial interests in China, and they're furthering their own commercial interests. I mean, why else would you go to sit with that rogues gallery? Putin, Kim Jong-un. I mean, seriously, sitting with all these people? No, this is a bad decision by Andrews and Carr. I mean, Carr, you would expect. He turns up at any extremist gathering, if he's got a time in his diary to fill in, he turns up at these extremist gatherings. But Daniel Andrews shouldn't be there. But as I said, I think it's more his commercial interests. But, neither should be there. It brings great discredit on them. And by the way, it brings discredit on the Labor government here because they could have bent their arms and stopped them from going, which they obviously didn't do.
Anthony Albanese, it's now been 300 days since President Trump's remarkable second election victory, and we've seen Trump meet with dozens of world leaders, but of course, not our Prime Minister, Michael, not Anthony Albanese. Is Australia being left behind, partly because Albanese can't get this meeting?
Well, he's too nervous to have a meeting. He can't possibly have a meeting in the Oval Office. I mean, if you remember the things he said and that Ambassador Rudd, our wonderful ambassador to the US, has said about Trump, extremely derogatory things. He can't afford to sit in the White House, in the Oval Office, with Marco Rubio and JD Vance looking around the room, spying our ambassador and saying, aren't you the bloke that called our president basically a nutcase and a threat to democracy? So Albanese can't go to the Oval Office. So we're confined to the situation where the Australian Prime Minister has to sort of, pull at Trump's coattails on the side of some conference in the middle of nowhere. That's all Australia has been, we've descended to because he can't front up to have a meeting with the President of the United States, one of our key allies. It's a very disappointing outcome for Albanese, but that's what you've come to expect from him. He's a hard left activist, as we've seen in his appalling performance over Israel and his lack of defence of the Jewish community. So shame on him, but it will be interesting to see when it happens. Who knows what will happen?
Well, the US slammed Albanese's decision to recognise the state of Palestine, and Anthony Albanese made that announcement after securing so-called commitments from Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. Well, it's interesting, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has barred Mahmoud Abbas from the UN General Assembly, and a statement from the White House essentially says that the Trump administration does not reward terrorism. Can I get your assessment of that decision? I suppose it was going to be expected. And of course, the contrast we're seeing between the US's position here and Australia's.
Well, you can see the American administration's point, can't you? Abbas has a long and shameful record of Jewish hatred. He made comments praising Hitler. He's paid the families of terrorists who've killed Jews over the years, etc., etc., etc. He's called for Israel's destruction over the decades. Now, apparently, he's taking the road to Damascus. He's changing the policies he's had for a lifetime. He now thinks there should be elections. He now recognises Israel's right to exist. All of the things this guy's opposed for years, he's now saying he supports in a limp conversation with our Prime Minister here. The two things that weren't mentioned, most importantly, the right to return. Has Abbas given away the Palestinians, demand that they can go back and live in Israel, from which they left or expelled or escaped in 1948 and beyond? And secondly, at a far more minor level, did Albanese receive from Mahmoud Abbas any commitments about the rights of minorities, gay rights, etc.? I mean, this is a big issue in Australia. It's a big issue in the Western world. Did he ask Abbas that in a Palestinian state there would be the rights protected for minorities and that they won't be thrown off roofs? He didn't mention that. And that's one of the reasons why this Palestinian state is a road to nowhere until all of these issues are resolved, and none of them have been.
Finally, Michael, over the weekend we saw tens of thousands of people taking to the streets, taking part in this March for Australia protest. Of course, we saw extremists there. However, there were plenty of genuine Australians, making their voices heard, I suppose, really sending a message over mass migration. Can I get your thoughts?
Well, it looked to me like 95% of the people attending those rallies were good, decent, middle-class Australians worried about too much immigration, as they are in pretty well every Western country in the world. We had a small group of neo-Nazis attend. I don't know why these neo-Nazis don't attend the Palestinian demonstrations, because the main thing that defines neo-Nazis is their hatred of Jews. And if there's any display of Jewish hatred in Australia today, it's in rogue elements at these Palestinian demonstrations where they're calling for the death to the IDF, the death to Netanyahu, pro-Hamas slogans, photographs of Ayatollah Khamenei, the triangles of Hamas, etc., Islamic State flags, Hamas flags, Hezbollah flags. If there's any Jewish hatred, it's on exhibition at these Palestinian demonstrations, and that's where the neo-Nazis should be going, not to demonstrations which had nothing to do with the Middle East or the Jewish community, but everything about the 95% love of this country.
Michael Kroger, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure, Gab.